One of the blessings of God's way in my life is this is the third time I've gotten to speak here right after Jabari has sung. So I am inspired. And to have Reverend Kristen here, I felt myself getting nervous. Well, what we do, what we do to ourselves. Wow. Oh, because the universe, the blessings are right here. It's right here for us. Right now. In 1960s, some of you might remember this. I, of course, was way too young. The United States received a gift that had come from India. It was a white tiger named Mohini. Does anyone remember that story? Yeah. And for years, Mohini lived in the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., and she spent her days pacing back and forth in a 12 by 12 cage, continuously walking the same figure 8 over and over every day, all day, every day. And finally, after many years, the zoo officials decided to build her a much larger habitat, which in one there were grassy hills and trees, a pond. And in this lush environment, they felt she could run and climb, explore. But when she arrived at her spacious new home, she didn't respond in the way that they had expected. She didn't rush out and eagerly explore what would be her natural habitat, her new home. Instead, she immediately went to a corner of the area next to a wall and began pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth within a 12 by 12 foot square. And she paced this same figure 8 pattern until the grass was worn bare, and she did that for the rest of her life until she died. Now that's a really sad story to us, and perhaps because maybe in some way we could identify with Mohini. I mean, the tiger is a symbol of wildness and freedom and unlimitedness, beauty, all the qualities that we have in our essential nature, all those qualities that we have that are us in our soul. And it seems tragic enough with its natural environment, and this unlimited freedom is blocked by external circumstances like the original cage that housed Mohini. But the level of tragedy is even greater when the external cage becomes internalized and keeps one prisoner long after the original bars have been removed. And the bars still exist, and they exist in mind. So like Mohini, we've each learned how to deal with the limitations that are imposed on us. We've developed these habituated patterns that arise when we feel that our soul or our essence has been stifled. And we've survived by mechanically conforming, living less than the fullness of life that's available to us. And at the time, it might feel like it's the only alternative, it's the only way we can survive. I know that's been so for me. I mean, we just had the fires, in Napa. Remember, I live in Napa. And I went kind of nutsy, which surprised me because I'm usually good in the crisis and I handle things, but the air quality just freaked me out. I wasn't afraid that my house would burn, even though I could look across the street where there's some vineyards across the street, and on the other side the hills were on fire. But I knew that the vineyards, was that natural barrier, but the air was like soup. And I was obsessively, and we couldn't be home. We had no electricity, no power, no cell phone, so I was out and about, evacuated, so to speak. And where I was obsessively looking at the air quality index, like several times a day on a computer or my phone. I mean, it was kind of crazy. I just went into this limited freak out and kind of lost it for a while, for a few days. And I kind of still feel, because it's like breath, my breath. It's the fire's one thing, it burns something, it's gone, but the air, our air, it was, what did they say, it was beyond anything that had been measured before in San Francisco, and we were worse up in Napa. Ooh, I didn't mean to go off on that, but no triggers. So imagine that we could hire a tiger therapist for Mohini. So she could help her break free from her mechanized existence, this routine, so she could have a fuller life in this new kingdom that was laid out in front of her. And this hypothetical therapist might begin by asking Mohini about her present moment. What are you feeling? What's it like in your body? What's your experience right now? What are you aware of? And the therapist would ask her if she was aware that she was no longer in the same cage, and that the bars were no longer there. And if and when she could see her present reality, then the therapist might point out that she had a choice to make. She could continue in that routine, she could feel safe, or she could choose to live differently. She could choose to live differently. She could choose to be free and unlimited. But the price of this freedom would not be small. She would have to face her feelings about having had this wild, free, and unlimited nature crushed by having to live in this small cage for so many years. She would probably discover a lot of rage, and then she would have to discharge this rage in an appropriate manner. Probably there'd be a lot of roaring, wouldn't you think? And eventually she would have this intense grief resulting from her lost freedom, and she would have to learn how to function completely in a new environment, in a new way. Recovery wouldn't be easy, but certainly possible if she had the will and courage, because to avoid the discomfort would be to avoid the healing. To avoid the discomfort is to avoid the healing. To avoid being free and unlimited. Well, most likely Mohini didn't have the ability to be able to make this choice for healing. But I do. And you do. Because no matter what your past choices have been, you can make a new one. I mean, this is what the songs have been. The songs and tonight's Burning Bowl. Because sometimes we have to do it over and over and over and over again. And over again and then again. And then next year we get to do it again. Because we can always choose the meaning that we're giving to the present moment. Viktor Frankl's The Man's Search for Meaning. How we are in these crazy situations. I spoke here, I think, right after the election last year. Boy, that was something, wasn't it? And no matter what side or leanings that you have, what we talked about then, and I just remember this so clearly, was the ability we needed to cultivate to be able to reach across and speak to people, to communicate, to be able to have that I-thou experience with those that perhaps feel and think differently. And the holidays, you know, where you're with maybe family members or people that may not be aligned in your credo and thinking the way you are. What a great opportunity that has been, hasn't it? So to be free and unlimited is like we have to release these illusions that we have about ourselves. And I don't know about you, but for me, the older I get, the harder that is. Because I go around thinking I'm pretty cool, and then whammo, you know, it just hits me. And those things that come out for healing. You know, the opportunity I had around the fire. And what really upset me about the fire was a family member that didn't see the severity of it. That's what just drove me nuts. That this person wasn't getting it, that he needed to leave and take his family with him. I'll leave when they knock on the door, my suitcase is packed. It's the air. It's the air. And I wasn't listened to, which is crazy. I mean, you come here to listen to me, right? People show up. Well, I mean, you didn't know you were doing that today, we know. But, you know, people come to listen to me. People put down money to listen to me. We have to stay present every moment. That has to be our practice. And that's why we need people to help us. We need our ministers and our counselors and our prayer chaplains and our friends and all that. Because we need people to hold the truth for us when we forget to do it or forget how to do it. Which isn't as often as it used to be, right? But we do. Because what we're doing here today, you can do at home. You could go online, you could YouTube, whatever. But there, and those of you at home are with us on media, but there's something so special about coming together in person, of seeing each other, of hugging each other, of being reminded, of listening together. There's that juice that we get, and that's why we do this. That's why we're still viable in Unity. That's why we can't wait to get back here week after week. And I tell you, I miss that because there was something about speaking every Sunday that kept me very present in my own process, because I knew by Sunday morning I had to be present. I couldn't be telling myself that story I've been doing all week, or being the victim, or having stuff not work out, or being that thing that I do. And so I have to do it in a different way. And here I get a phone call from Kristen on Friday. Not enough time to, I'm going to, It's just, okay, I'm going to just show up and say yes, because that's what I do. I say yes. And you do too, right? Yeah. Evolution is always in the direction of greater awareness. Any of you familiar with the Tibetan book of Living and Dying, Sogyal Rinpoche? It's just one of my favorite books. And he says, mind is the universal base of experience, the creator of happiness, and the creator of suffering. He teaches of two aspects of mind, the sem and the rigpa. Interesting words, not really in our everyday vocabulary. Sem is that ordinary mind, the one that plans and desires and manipulates, acts in that place of duality. Sem, according to the Tibetan masters, is like a flame in an open doorway that's just going, wherever. I mean, you get the picture. Then there's the very nature of mind, its innermost essence. That is always untouched by circumstances or by death, by change. And the Tibetan Buddhists say that rigpa is hidden in our own self, in that sem, and obscured by that mental scurry of thoughts and emotions. And that's why we sit. That's why we practice, to let those things go, because they're supposed to be in our mind. That's what minds do, but not to hold on and be attached. So this rigpa is like this primordial, pristine awareness that is intelligent and cognizant and radiant and always awake. Every year I still use a little calendar, like a paper one, an actual paper one that about that size. And I have a Post-it that I put in the beginning and the open flap several years ago. And every year I move the Post-it. And I did that last night, getting my book ready. And what I had written on this Post-it years ago was, awareness remains unchanged. And so when I open my calendar, no matter what day it is or what I'm planning or what happened or didn't happen, that awareness remains unchanged. That thing, that isness. Saints and mystics throughout history have adorned their realizations with different names for this thing, for this essence. When I was a child, and I've probably told you this before, I grew up in the Bronx, right near where that building burned recently. And we were culturally Jewish, but not religiously. I say I got the food and the guilt part. But my mother she was sort of an old beatnik person, and bohemian. We were raised that way. And the God talk she would say was, because it was, it loves to happen. It loves to happen. So there's that it. Now, most Christians and Jews call that it God. Hindus call it the self, Shiva. Brahman, Vishnu. Sufi mystics call it hidden essence. Buddhists call it the Buddha nature. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Charles Filmer talked about it as this harmonizing, unifying energy of the universe. But what we know is that at the heart of all religions, of all truths, is that this life is a sacred opportunity to evolve, to find a deeper meaning, to find what is that is me. What is this sure awareness of our oneness, or what we call the Christ in unity, not talking about Jesus, but about that energy, that anointing, because that's what that means, Christos, the anointed one. Each one of us is that, of course. So how do we do that? How, that stuff, it's like, it's not tangible, but it's that thing that is uniquely and only you. And maybe it comes out in your music, and maybe it comes out in your writing, or your parenting, or your cooking, or your knitting. There's all those places that we get to be that isness of ourselves. And for most of our lives, most of us, I'm still looking. It's over here, and then it's over here, and then it's over there. I would love to, I have this vision of where I would be at this time of my life. That I would be, you know that one? It's like, I won't say that word. And so we're chopping wood and carrying water and saying yes when the phone rings, because what else is there to do? And to listen and to read and do all those things that feel good to a certain point. Because Emily Cady in Lessons from Truth, she says desire is always God tapping on the door of your consciousness. Isn't that nice? The Buddha says desire is the cause of all suffering. Though I would call that being attachment to desire is the cause of suffering. There's something wonderful about desire. Physical desire, desire for this oneness. These are such interesting times, aren't they? I mean, the best thing that we can do is our own practice. It's like the only thing to do. And what is it I'm to do? Is it to be an activist outside, externally, internally? What is it that I believe and stand for, and that's really important for me to stay with? These are interesting times. And more than ever, it's time to really know what that is, to know what it is inside yourself. And how do you find that? Well, that's the practice. That's the practice. So since evolution is moving in the direction of greater awareness, it makes sense to, again, be in a practice. Some of us use mindfulness, meditation. Some of us do service. That's our way. Some of us have this life of prayer that Janet Manning, who wrote that song, I Am Free, I Am Unlimited, when I was at Unity School of Ministerial Training, she was our chaplain. And she was just this light being, a wonderful musician, a wonderful presence. And she taught this class called Life of Prayer, which was just so beautiful because it was like living constantly in this life of prayer. Now, Reverend Denise gave me a book for my birthday this summer, and I just would open it and look at it, and then I started reading it from the beginning, and it's the Book of Joy. Has anybody been with this book? This is a book by, Doug Abrams, but what this book is, a year or two ago, in honor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's 80th birthday, Archbishop Tutu traveled from South Africa to Dharamsala, which was not an easy task logistically and health-wise, for them to spend a week together in dialogue talking about joy. Now, if those two people, with what they've been through, can talk about joy and choose joy, I got a lot of work to do. So just as well I'm not where I thought I'd be yet, because there's a lot to do. Now, Buddhists don't, as far as I know, and I'm not much of a student of Buddhism, they don't really believe, the belief system isn't in a deity. It's in the present moment and in these teachings. And the Dalai Lama claims that the purpose of life is to be happy. Now, some of us feel happy when we just sort of shut everything else out and, eat the chocolate cake. And some of us are happy when we're holding that child or, again, knitting, because I'm a knitter as well, That kind of keeps me, I'm not very good, but I'm prolific, Just keeps growing, whatever I'm making. And they both, His Holiness, 5 hours a day of prayer, and then, the Archbishop only does 4. What it takes. And this is what's so beautiful about Unity. I was so surprised when I found Unity because it really made so much sense. And I found Unity at Unity Santa Barbara back in a long time ago when we rented the church. See, this is God's sense of humor because there's no way I would go to a Christian church, But we rented the church. My husband and I rented the church to do some workshops in that we did. And that church had no crosses and a beautiful mural of the ocean. It was like, oh, this is nice, And then one thing led to another, and, and you see those things that you're stuck in, and then that just keeps opening up and opening. And the next thing we knew, we're in the U-Haul moving to Missouri. Yeah. We can change our experience of life by changing how we think about it. And that is the most amazing of our principles to me, the 5 principles, is that we can change our experience by consciously changing how we think. It's not a la-la, everything's wonderful, because it isn't. Obviously, it takes His Holiness 5 hours a day to get, so why should it take us like 20 minutes, I thought of doing stand-up at one point, but then I realized I already do it, But, yeah, I'm standing up, exactly. I'm still standing. And what did Tyler call me? The last minute minister. So, it's great. I have like a title now. It's good. He promised me a t-shirt. I'm going to hold out for that. I like purple. So. Or silver, to go with my aura. So tonight you have your burning bowl. Isn't that great? I mean, I love that. And you get to say no, and then you get to say yes. Isn't that cool? I mean, we get to do that every moment, but to do it in ceremony, to do it in ritual, what a good thing that is. If they can do it, we can do it too. And that's what we say about Jesus, right? That's what Jesus said about him, supposedly. At least that's what's written. That you can do the same things that I can do. I mean, then this church structure, what did they say? Something about church became churchianity, So it became this sort of structure that really had nothing to do with the original beautiful teachings. These incredible teachings by a rabbi who was a radical teacher and healer at his time. And he said we can do what he did, and even greater things. His Holiness and Archbishop, they say the same thing in more of a folksy way. And they spend a week talking about it. You might want to get this book, The Book of Joy. And they give us some tools. They talk about the obstacles to joy, the envy, and the loneliness, and the depression, and how we can turn those things around through practice. So are you willing? Do you want to? I mean, you might want to continue to feel safe and do what you've been doing, or you might be willing to live differently and be more alive and free. I mean, it's really up to you. So I celebrate who you are, what you're doing. Unity Center of Walnut Creek feels so lovely and grounded and calm. I've been coming here for years and all kinds of things, back with the balcony, everything. And so it's nice to just be up the road 45 minutes, depending on the time of day, and checking in. The miracle of spiritual awareness is always here. It's always like just a little click away. It's not when things get better, when things change, that external we internalize. It's right now. So grab it, have it, love it. Make 2018 the most centered, generative, restorative year of your life. So we have an affirmation, right? Oh, perfect. Okay. So we'll say this together, yeah? I am free. I am unlimited. I am ready for my best year yet. So shalom, namaste, amen. Thank you. All is well.